Some news here regarding Ron DeSantis and his stunt in using 50 migrants as political pawns by inducing them onto an aircraft and shipping them to Martha's Vineyard. These migrants have filed a class action lawsuit against Ron DeSantis and other Florida officials seeking compensatory, emotional distress, and punitive damages. According to the lawsuit, the migrants accused DeSantis and his co-conspirators of, quote, designing and executing a premeditated, fraudulent, and illegal scheme centered on exploiting this vulnerability for the sole purpose of advancing their own personal, financial, and political interests. This scheme involved DeSantis identifying and targeting class members by trolling streets outside of a migrant shelter in Texas and other similar locales, pretending to be good Samaritans offering humanitarian assistance. It went on to claim, quote, to gain the plaintiff's trust and to induce unwitting cooperation with defendant's scheme, DeSantis and his co-conspirators provided items such as $10 McDonald's gift certificates to class members suffering from chronic food insecurity. After luring plaintiffs by exploiting their most basic needs, they then made false promises that if they were willing to board airplanes to other states, they would receive employment, housing, educational opportunities, and other like assistance upon their arrival. The complaint goes on to reveal that DeSantis and his co-conspirators, quote, told them they were flying to Boston or Washington, D.C., which was completely false. Instead, the chartered airplanes dropped plaintiffs off on Martha's Vineyard in the evening with no food, water, or shelter. No one on Martha's Vineyard knew they were coming. And finally, it's worth noting that, quote, the plaintiffs' participation in the federal immigration processes, to which they were constitutionally entitled, was impeded as they were transported thousands of miles away from where they needed to continue immigration proceedings. Plaintiffs were not informed that they would be flown to an island off the coast of Massachusetts that can only be reached by plane or ferry. The first time that many of the putative class learned that their destination was Martha's Vineyard was when they were midair. When they arrived, they were not provided with any of the goods and services which they were promised by defendants. They felt defrauded and tricked and were traumatized by the experience. According to a Rolling Stone article written by political reporter Nikki McCann Ramirez, because these migrants were misled about job opportunities and housing and even their destination, DeSantis and his co-conspirators may have committed fraud or even kidnapping. According to Georgetown law professor Heidi Lee Feldman, deception by transport organizers would mean these migrants likely have a viable cause of action to sue DeSantis and those who helped him for intentional infliction of emotional distress as well as pain and suffering. The DOJ could also intervene and take legal action. USC law professor Gene Rees explained that having state officials like DeSantis or Abbott orchestrating these stunts would, quote, frustrate the government's enforcement ability. For his part, California Governor Gavin Newsom revealed that he was, quote, formally requesting the DOJ begin an immediate investigation into these inhumane efforts to use kids as political pawns. And of course, we had this announcement by the sheriff in Bexar County, Texas.
With regard to the suspected activities involving the 48 migrants from Venezuela, that, as we understand it at this point, the facts of the case at this point, are that on Wednesday, September 14th, here in Bexar County in the city of San Antonio, our understanding is that a Venezuelan migrant was paid what we would call a bird dog fee to recruit approximately 50 migrants from the area around a migrant resource center on San Pedro here in San Antonio. As we understand it, 48 migrants were lured, I will use the word lured, under false pretenses into staying at a hotel for a couple of days. They were taken by airplane. At a certain point, they were shuttled to an airplane where they were flown to Florida, and then eventually flown to Martha's Vineyard, again under false pretenses is the information that we have, that they were promised work, they were promised the solution to several of their problems. They were taken to Martha's Vineyard from what we can gather for little more than a photo op, video op, and then they were unceremoniously stranded in Martha's Vineyard. What infuriates me the most about this case is that here we have 48 people that are already on hard times, right? They are here legally in our country at that point. They have every right to be where they are. And I believe that they were preyed upon. Somebody came from out of state, preyed upon these people, lured them with promises of a better life, which is what they were absolutely looking for, with the knowledge that they were going to cling to whatever hope they could be offered for a better life, to just be exploited and hoodwinked into making this trip to Florida and then onward to Martha's Vineyard for what I believe to be nothing more than political posturing to make a point. And all indications are that at this point we are going to be opening an investigation. It is way too early for me to start naming any suspects. We do have the names of some suspects involved that we believe are persons of interest in this case at this point, but I won't be parting with those names. I think to be fair, I think everybody on this call knows who those names are already, so I won't be naming any of them. But suffice it to say, we will be opening up a case.
And so one would think that given the swift and pretty devastating response from the legal community, that Ron DeSantis might have just a shred of remorse, might recognize that not only did he exploit human beings for partisan political gain, but that he may very well have screwed himself over in the process. Well, DeSantis' office responded, and I hope you're sitting down for this, he doesn't seem to regret it. The statement said, quote, "It is opportunistic that activists would use illegal immigration for political theater. If these activists spend even a fraction of this time and effort at the border, perhaps some accountability would be brought to the Biden administration's reckless border policies that entice illegal immigrants to make dangerous and often lethal journeys through Central America and put their lives in the hands of cartels and coyotes. The transportation of the immigrants to Martha's Vineyard was done on a voluntary basis. The immigrants were homeless, hungry, and abandoned, and these activists didn't care about them then. Florida's program gave them a fresh start in a sanctuary state, and these individuals opted to take advantage of chartered flights to Massachusetts. It was disappointing that Martha's Vineyard called in the Massachusetts National Guard to bust them away from the islands within 48 hours. First of all, I just read the sentence, "It is opportunistic that activists would use illegal immigrants for political theater." From Ron DeSantis, the guy who sent starving migrants on a plane to an island with a videographer in tow and Fox News waiting. That guy is accusing activists of political theater. If you needed any proof that everything on the right is projection, you just got it. But beyond that, here's where DeSantis may have actually done himself a lot more harm than good. This very statement by DeSantis' office reads, quote, "The immigrants were homeless, hungry, and abandoned," meaning that when DeSantis and his co-conspirators offered these people $10 McDonald's gift cards, the context under which those gift cards were given sure does suggest that there was a degree of inducement by exploiting these migrants' basic needs. If Ron DeSantis himself admitted just how starving these people were, then the lawsuit alleging that these people were handed gift cards for food sure does get viewed in a different light. Sometimes you gotta just let criminals keep talking and they'll do all the heavy lifting for you. So I know that Ron DeSantis will continue to dig in his heels, he'll continue releasing patronizing statements, he'll continue to run a victory lap because for him, as is the case for all Republicans these days, this stunt was always about attention and he got it. What I hope will happen, though, is that we'll actually see some of these people held to account for their actions in the same justice system that doesn't hesitate for a moment to prosecute regular people. So we either have two tiers of justice in this country or not. If it's the latter, then now is the time to prove it. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.